Hello there. I'm Mary Edwards with Connecting to the Stars, and I'm happy to be interviewing the amazing Preston Dennett today. Hello, Dennis. Preston, nice to see you today.
Thanks. Always a delight to see you too.
Alrighty. So what we're going to talk about today is I'm going to talk about his bio first, and then we're going to dive into a couple of his personal contact experiences, and then talk about UFO healings and positive encounters that he's had. So we'll dive in right now with his bio. So Preston began investigating UFOs and the paranormal in 1986 when he discovered that his family, friends, and coworkers were having dramatic, unexplained encounters. Since then, he has interviewed hundreds of witnesses and investigated a wide variety of paranormal phenomena. He is a field investigator for MUFON, a ghost hunter, a paranormal researcher, and author of 30 books and more than 100 articles on UFOs and the paranormal. Several of his books have been Amazon UFO bestsellers. His articles have appeared in numerous magazines, including Fate, Atlantis Rising, MUFON UFO Journal, Nexus, Paranormal Magazine, UFO Magazine, Phenomena Magazine, Mysteries Magazine, UFOologists, and others. His writing has been translated into several different languages, including German, French, Portuguese, Russian, and Icelandic. He has appeared on numerous radio and television programs, including Midnight in the Desert with Art Bell, Coast to Coast, and also the History Channel's Deep Sea UFOs and UFO Hunters. His research has been presented in the LA Times, the LA Daily News, the Dallas Morning News, and other newspapers. He's taught classes on various paranormal subjects and lectures across the United States. Needless to say, he probably never sleeps because of how much work you do all day long to inform us of these incredible experiences that you have and share. So what I'd like you to do is start with one or two contacts of what started that you had, your personal ones that got you involved with this, and then we can go on to other illuminating topics.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, this was actually not a subject I was interested in really at all. I was very skeptical, in fact. I did not want to talk about UFOs. I didn't believe in them. Even my brother came running to the house one evening. I was probably 14 years old or so, and said he'd seen a UFO. I'm like, Mark, you did not. Shut up. Go away. But that all changed when I was 21 years old, 1986. There was this report on the news about a sighting over Alaska by a Japanese commercial airline pilot, Kenju Torochi. I remember his name. And they just kind of joked about his sighting on the news. But it interested me enough to start asking people, like my brother Mark, and he described this amazing sighting. I found out that both my sister-in-laws had encounters, not only sightings, but with actual entities. I had a lot of friends who had sightings, 3, 4, 5, and that started adding up after that. A couple of nephews had sightings, a bunch of people at work. I was scandalized, I was shocked, I was just blown over. And that's how I got into the field. I bought all the books I could find, joined every organization, became a field investigator for MUFON. But after interviewing people, I'm like, I want to see one. I'd really like to see one. And that all happened in an avalanche, really, in 1992. Starting in July, late July, I had my first real sighting in which an orb dropped down out of the sky and parked itself right in front of my car when I was driving home one evening. And I came to a stop, of course, because this thing was right in front of my windshield. It darted back and forth a few times, went straight up. I ended up having, I believe, missing time because I don't remember what happened. In fact, I forgot about the whole darn sighting until some months later. But yeah, that was a huge year. I had probably close to, I'd have to fully count them, at least five major sightings.
And what do you think that was, what was happening with you then? Were you starting just because of your family and you were starting to believe a little bit, or what year was this to? I mean, what was going on the planet? I mean, was that part of it, or was it mostly because the exposure and sort of validation from your family that this just exploded onto you, or is your time, I guess?
I guess I would really like to know. Yeah, I think it was very carefully planned, perhaps on the part of the ETs. I can't say that for sure. I'm speculating, but it was absolutely a momentous turnaround in my life. It was 1992, and you know, July of 1992. That was my first big sighting. I think let me see, 65, 75, 85. That would make like 27 years old.
And where were you living? And were also the sightings that your family and friends had, were they from all over the country or from that same area?
Mostly that same area, Southern California. I was living in Canoga Park. That first sighting was just a few minutes away from my brother Mark's house, which was in neighboring Woodland Hills. At that time, I was investigating a huge wave of sightings into Benga Canyon. I ended up writing a book about that. But that's, 1 month later, we went on a family vacation, and Marco, my brother, Christy, his wife, and I stayed up late. Everyone else went to sleep, and we had another sighting where a UFO was pretty high up there, but we communicated with it with our flashlight. It was a very powerful flashlight. We had intentionally stayed up hoping we would see something. This was in Mount Shasta, Crater Lake area. So that was cool. And then 1 month after that, Stephen Greer, the famous researcher, experiencer, came to LA to form a LA group of CSETI, Center for Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, which is all about close encounters of the fifth kind. And we had a sighting the first night. A group of us went out. I ended up joining the group. We had a little LA group of about 10 core members. And I had a series of sightings that year with them, actually over a period of years, and just kind of snowballed from there. I ended up, associating very closely with a lot of contactees, and some of them, became very good friends. And I had some really remarkable sightings that way. So over the years, it's been close to 10 to 20 really, for me, hands down, absolutely unexplained encounters, and a lot of anomalous lights and stuff. But yeah, at some point I realized, I wonder if they know about me. It became clear they did at some point, absolutely 100% clear. And that, yeah, and to some degree, I'm a contactee. I'm still kind of trying to wrap my head around that, but yeah, I absolutely have had my own encounters.
Well, and plus they have been watching. I mean, I'm sure they've been watching you a lot because of all the work you've been doing, but I know they were watching me. And I literally at 19, after I'd gone on a craft at, 5 and 6 and 10, they said, you're going to wake up at 70. And I mean, so many people told me that, so many readers and Russianists, they said, and so I thought, well, how could 5 or 6 people over decades of my life tell me that last year was going to be my year? So they've always said, and my star family have said, it's step by step. And, I did the book with Barbara last year. And I think because of my diving into this, I think they are watching, and they do pick the time, unless it's just at birth. I mean, what do you think it is really? Do you think it seems like it's timed and planned.
Yeah, I think so. I think they're very much on top of things, extremely aware, watching everybody. And to
And
some
bloodlines, right?
Yeah, but they're contacting everyone to some degree. A lot of people might have just one simple sighting, and that's enough for them.
Hmm.
Some people, I think, have a mission to do. I knew from a very young age I was going to be a writer. And, with 5 brothers and sisters, they're looking at me like, how could you possibly know that? I'm like, I just know it. This is what I'm going to do with my life. I remember my brother Jamie's like, you're lucky. I have no idea what I'm going to do. But I did. I knew from a very young age that I had a path that I wanted to follow.
That's crazy. I did too. Yeah, that first contact at age 5, I came back and started painting rocks and wood and anything I could get my hands on with orbs and planets and stuff. And I've been doing art like that and design for my whole life. But I'm glad that I got a way to express myself early on. I mean, that art piece of art right there is my first trip up of just what it would look like to me getting up there. But anyway, what a fascinating story. So you have your family or in the military or anything to trigger that, or was it just a curiosity and a psychism, do you think? Or
No, I have no real military connections in my family, not directly. I will say my grandfather was, and my great grandfather were pretty highly placed. One was a colonel, and the other, I think they were both colonels, actually. I never met them. They passed away before I was born. No direct family members until recently. I do have a nephew who joined the service, but no one in military intelligence or anything like that. So I'm not sure there's so much of a connection there. And in fact, my dad was really worked in the movie business mostly. Was not happy that I was talking about UFOs, and most of my brothers and sisters weren't either, except Mark. He had his encounter, and my sisters were totally okay with it. They always believed, even though they've never had encounters. My sister, little sister, ended up having several major encounters. I think she's probably a contactee because I mean, she had some very close-up sightings where she interacted with them. Later, that was during the Topanga Canyon wave, 1992 to 94.
well, it's
So
really
yeah,
interesting. Yeah, well, that is. And mine go back to or 90 generations and generations that I've just been researching this last year. So it's been fun to research that. But anyway, that's incredible. So well, your father he was in film, he was a storyteller, and you are too, in with writing, like he partly, and then contactees with contact with all your family makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Really
He had a real aversion to the subject, which I've come to realize is in fact a sign, because some people just really just prefer to deny. They just don't want it to be a part of their lives for whatever reason. And he was just, stop talking about UFOs.
Well, my dad did that too, but that was the generation, and Dad was in it, so he didn't talk to me my whole life. I mean, people in the 50s and 60s and 70s really didn't, even though it was the first space race. You would think that would be a time when we got the first man on the moon in 1969 and all the things that we all knew anyway. But anyway, that's really interesting. So do you want to talk about some of your positive experiences that you've had then, or any encounters that you've had that about and the healings? I know you've written about that and have talked to so many about that. It's really beautiful that they are really here to help us and not hinder us, is bottom line, right?
Exactly. I got involved in this field and I'm reading all these books. Gosh, this is kind of scary. What is going on here? Because it just didn't feel like I was being told the whole truth. Because one of my first cases involving direct contact was with a lady I'll call Wendy, really bubbly, fun, super psychic lady who lived in the LA area. I met her actually at a Crystal Skull meeting. I got to see Max, the Crystal Skull. It was pretty cool. But she sat next to me and I'm looking at her. I'm like, gosh, she seems interesting to me. And we just started talking, and she started talking about UFOs and her contacts. I'm like, wow. And I'm like, can I interview you? And she's like, of course. And she described how she had contact throughout her life. She had outside witnesses, her family, her friends were seeing them, but it was definitely centered around her. And it was very scary for her in the beginning. But she said, honestly, they're my friends. I love them. I look at them as family. I'm in telepathic communication with them. They healed me. I'm like, wait, what? She's like, yeah, I was diagnosed with a cyst in my fallopian tubes. And she says it was quite painful and really it was causing all kinds of problems. And she and her boyfriend were really upset about it, naturally. And she had to have surgery, which is not fun, but she, was set up to go have surgery. She had all the imaging. This was diagnosed. And it was the evening before the surgery. which happens in so many cases of healings, by the way. I call it the last minute syndrome. Like right before someone goes to surgery, the ETs will come, and they did that night. Came into her room. She doesn't remember a whole lot of what happened, just that they were in her room and something happened. She woke up the next morning going, this means something, but she went to the surgeon anyway, and they did the pre-op imaging, and they were not happy when they came into her room and started showing her the images, and like, where you went to another doctor, didn't you? You went to another hospital. And she's like, what are you talking about? She knows at this point what probably happened, but she's playing dumb. And they said, your cyst is gone. It's gone. And we know you've had surgery. There's fluid here in your fallopian tube. It's only present if someone's had surgery. And they examined her abdomen. And he's like, these look like little laser scars. What is that? And she's still playing dumb. And they just kind of shook their heads. And I'm like, why didn't you just say, Wendy? Just tell them. She's like, are you kidding? The men with white coats would come and cart me away. I'm like, oh, okay. And I later on realized that is an actual danger. I've talked to a few people who were taken by the men in white coats to a mental institution, committed by their family, even though they had outside witnesses and proof. So that was the first healing case. At the time, I hadn't written any books. I'd written maybe 30, 40 articles. I thought this would be a good subject for an article, because I instantly thought of about 10 cases that I knew in the literature involving healings. I thought, why isn't anyone talking about this? There's a doctor in France, a case from Jacques Vallée, who was a very prominent researcher, still is, this doctor was healed of 2 conditions after being struck by a beam of light from a UFO. I mean, it healed him of a flesh wound. He had been cutting wood with an axe, and the axe slipped and gashed his ankle. And he was also partially paralyzed, which was a real burden for him. He had been a piano player, professional, but injuries received during the Algerian War years earlier had put an end to that. But this UFO showed up, shined a beam of light on him, and boom, healed him of 2 conditions. I thought, okay, this is going to make a good article, because I knew of a case in Brazil involving a little girl who was the daughter of a prominent politician. And this was one of the first healing reports on record. And apparently these little ET guys showed up and was seen by the entire family, including the maid, who was the one who kind of leaked this out. And these little guys came in and performed surgery on this little girl and cured her of stomach cancer. And it was very well verified, because there was, a lot of witnesses. That was another case. And there was another case involving a Peruvian customs official who was out on his veranda, struck by a violet beam of light, purple, and it cured him of rheumatism and nearsightedness. 2 things. And there was other cases. 2 police officers in Damon, Texas, had come upon this UFO, a very large kind of football-shaped object, which struck them with a beam of light. And one of them, Officer Good, had his arm hanging out the window, and he could feel the beam. It was warm and tingly, he said, and it healed him of a wound on his finger. He had been bit by his son's baby pet alligator and had this wound, and it healed him. I mean, there was several other cases that I knew of. I thought, let's dig deeper. And I found like 30, 40 cases, and just going through my books in one day. I'm like, this is not going to be an article. This is going to be a book. And so I spent a year of research and contacting other researchers and interviewing as many people as I could find, and found over 100 cases. That was my first book. I've since had it republished, because every time I spoke, anytime I went on the radio or to a convention, someone would come up out of the audience every single time. Like, this is far more common than I realized. And I found like now it's well over 300 cases. So this is absolutely a major part of the ET's contact with humanity. This is why people are being taken on board, I believe, physically examined. And I can tell you, Mary, that pretty much every major researcher out there, almost without exception, has these cases. Bud Hopkins, John Mack, David Jacobs, Edith Fiore, Barbara Lamb has several. They all do.
I do, and you do. I mean, it's just unbelievable that they are real. They're probably millions. You'll probably be researching for the next 10 or 20 or 30 years and find thousands, because this is what they do. They always have, right?
Exactly.
I mean, my car was totaled on the Golden Gate Bridge 4 years ago. Literally, these big black rocks, 3 black rocks crashed down onto my car, my Audi, driving from Sonoma. And I'm like, what? You know, there were a few cars around me. I was about to get onto the right, go through the Golden Gate Bridge. And I said, oh my gosh. And one went under the car, one went through the windshield. And it was like I was attacked. It was like big black. It was weird. I've never seen black rocks. Anyway. And I said, Archangel Michael, Pleiadians, help me, please. I cannot die today. I got to get through the bridge and have my car, because my car was smoking. I couldn't drive. I couldn't steer. One of the rocks went underneath my car. So my engine was all screwed up and I couldn't put my brakes on. And 2 seconds later, my hands were still like holding on for dear life and pushing my foot down. And it got me across the bridge to the parking lot at the Presidio Trust, where I asked them to take it. And I jumped out of the car and it just just died. And they saved me. And I've had a couple operations, part of the hybridization, because I had so many pregnancies that they came in and swooped and helped me that I've never really talked about, when I was in surgery a couple of times. And somehow, miraculously, I was healed too. I haven't really talked about those yet, but it was, because I have 100 hybrid kids, and I was pregnant really from age 16 all the way up until I had my human children at 38 and 39. But I couldn't understand why I was pregnant my whole life. And then I'd have these miscarriages, and but I hadn't even had relations with anybody. So anyway, I've had I think maybe I'll talk about that a little bit later at some point. I know
a couple of major researchers who have not gone public, who have had healings. They told me privately.
And I'm just starting to come out with this now, that my dad, my grandfather, all of hybrid kids, that they were part of the program. That's why Dad took me up on the craft, and why I've been so protected. And that first, time or two at 5 and 6, as I've mentioned to you, I was so freaked out. And now I just know that they're loving spirits. They're here. They talk to me. They come visit me. There's one right here next to me, a Pleiadian, Arcturian. I've been protected my whole life. And I know they helped adjust me and groom me for the off-planet work that I'm doing with interiors and some of the art that they're asking me to do on on other planets since I was like 10 years old. So I know that they've helped groom my art and interior design and architecture and structure, and also healed me in medical. I mean, I could have sued 2 hospitals 2 different times when they chopped me open after I went in, because I thought I had another miscarriage. And then they said, no, we did 2 abortions on you over the weekend. And I woke up with a huge cut. And that cut, now I had to get out because I was teaching, and I had a big design firm at the time, like 35 years ago. And all of a sudden I said, I'm out of here. I don't do hospitals. Plus, you have me in the maternity ward because you didn't know what to do with me. So I'm sitting in a hospital bed with a woman who just had a baby. And I wake up, and you drugged me so much that you did 2 operations on me. And I don't even remember any of it. And I should sue you, but I don't do that. Just get me out of here. And so literally by the time I woke up the next morning, these 30, 40 stitches on my tummy, below my belly button, were basically healed. And I could go teach a design class at the academy of our college, and I could go meet with my 15 people at the office that next morning. And I couldn't, and I've never talked about that, but it was, how could I get out of having 2 surgeries, Friday night and 1 Saturday night? And I didn't remember, they had me so drugged And they said, well, we couldn't find anything. So we went in again. And I said, well, I told you, I thought I just had a miscarriage, but I didn't know what those were back then. But anyway, and it was devastating. I mean, it was just, how the heck did that happen? And so I've had many experiences, and a near-death experience when I was 18 drowning. And I saw an angel. I've seen some things, but now it's all coming into clear vision, so much more that I'm talking about it. I'm sharing my information, so like you are, so we can help other people and guide other people and know that they're not crazy. I thought I was crazy my whole life until I started speaking to my dad a few months ago. It was 70 years of sort of not being talked to about any of this, because
I'm telling you,
they were
these
told to
people-
keep their trap shut, or we'd all be gone, or they'd be dead, or we'd be dead.
yeah, they intervene a lot more, I think, than people realize.
Yeah.
They're not tooting their own horn. They can do it very quietly. I think a lot of people never even know that they've been healing. There's spontaneous remissions, and it's not just healing. They do a lot of guidance, a lot of rescues. I've documented some dozen cases where people have been prevented from having car accidents. That happened to Dolly Saffron, who you know.
Oh, yes, I do. I love Sally. Dolly. What happened to her? Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, she was driving one evening, it was very stormy. She was driving with a friend of hers, and they had gotten lost. They weren't even quite aware of it at that point, but it was becoming a perilous situation because they were dead tired. They'd been doing a lot of driving. It was a very long car trip. And that's when her main contact, Talata, the ship, drops down out of the sky. And the person she was with is, oh my gosh, what's that? Dolly's like, oh, well, I guess you should know, that's a UFO. And basically guided her to the correct direction. Yeah, lots of cases like that. There's another lady who was driving along. She had just left her parents' house, and this UFO came down and knocked her car engine out and made her wait for 20 minutes. And when she finally got back on the highway, there was this huge accident. She would have been in it. That's what happened with Dolly, actually. There was an accident in front of her. I believe that was another occasion. But this is the sort of thing they do. I know of a case where a lady was being assaulted by a bad man, and he was going to do horrible things, and a UFO drops down right over them, and he looks up in terror and says, I think we better get out of here. And she's like, yeah, you go on. And she ran towards it. But people have been saved from drowning, from falls. There was one lady who drove halfway off a cliff, and these figures showed up and physically lifted her car up. There's, I mean, case after case of these sort of things happening. It's astonishing. One kid was drowning in a bog, and these little reptilian looking guys showed up and pulled him out. I'm telling you, there's case after case of them actually rescuing people from very perilous situations.
Right. It's so sad that they get such a bad rap. I mean, just like we just want to know the truth. And the truth is they have been watching us forever, since the beginning, and they have been helping us all since the beginning. I talked to my dad a couple of weeks ago, who passed about 10 years ago, that I mentioned. And I said, what was one of the most wonderful things? He had an aeronautical aerospace company. He and Von Braun went to Area 51 in 1951. He was up on the craft with me. He went to Mars 10 or 15 times, he said. I said, what was one of the most wonderful things that the Pleiadians and Arcturians and whoever anybody talks to, whoever their beings are, but he said, while he was in his Alzheimer's facility here in Sonoma, near where I live outside San Francisco, he said they came right before he passed, and I saw him the day he passed, like 8 or 9 years ago. But he never told me anything about all this then. And he said they spent about 2 or 3 hours with me. And I found a place where he could be in a small facility, because he got early onset. It's interesting. He got early onset Alzheimer's the day he sold his aeronautical aerospace company. And I don't really think that's a quinky-dink or a coincidence at all. I think they were because he said every day of his life recently was a test that he would not expose information with his aeronautical company that was working with, NASA and the military. He was in the Navy and the US government. but he just all of a sudden one day, literally the day they sold their company in 1991, his memory went. I mean, and I said to my mother and my sisters, this is nuts. This is something else going on here. This couldn't be. But anyway, he went to an Alzheimer's place for 12 years, near her, 10 or 12 years, however long it was. And he said that they came down to him right before he passed and said, would you like us to answer any questions for you? You were such a loyal serviceman to us, to the humanity, to the planet, to NASA, to the government. Would you like to know, can we answer any questions for you? And he said, well, yeah, there are a few questions. And then they said, thank you so much for what your family has done with the hybridization program. Thank you so much for what you did from everything with Einstein and Manhattan Project to saving our country with getting out of World War II, because his company had worked on the Manhattan Project. They did 30, 40 years. Their company started in 1896, and they did so much with helping. It was private, obviously. It was a public it was a big company. But anyway, he just said it was so heartwarming that he could have these questions answered privately with them before he passed. And now he's talking to me and he said, Mary, I'm just so happy that you have an environment now that you can actually talk about these incredible experiences that we've had and our families obviously had. And he said, not in secrecy anymore. There are no NDAs. You're not being told to have your trap shut. Of course, he's gone, his company's gone. But to know the truth after 71 years has just been the most relieving. I could burst out crying and cry for like 71 years because I never knew why he didn't talk to me about these things, because he was the one that was there with me at age 5 when I first went on craft. And then we went up many other times, and he's validating all, as my beings are, all this work I've been doing off planet with interiors and now, and with my art, sort of healing people through art, using art as a portal and doing interiors off planet that they've been grooming me for, taking what my father did with rockets and etc.
Yeah, well, this is a pattern I've noticed.
This is what I do. I make happier, healthier homes for people. That's all I've been obsessed by. I never cared about money. I never cared about all the wealth my family had. All I wanted was here to do was help heal people through the back door with my psychology, my intuition, my psychism that I know, and I know now they were helping and tweaking things at my birth to get rid of some of the fancy stuff, the dark money stuff that went back to kings and queens. And they have been helping me. My sisters didn't really get it. My mom didn't really get it, but my dad and I were always close. And so now I've had these, 15 or 20 talks with him, and I feel more at peace now than I've ever felt. I'm so settled now. I'm so grateful. I knew I wasn't crazy. I knew that he was part of it. And I'm just so relieved that that I tracked him down up there and is talking to me about this. And I'm sure you and any other people will really benefit from talking to our families about what they know when they're gone. I mean, they're not good. Nobody's ever gone. We don't die. We know, we just continue on. We just keep going. And I've always believed that, but positivity is there. I mean, we're walking proof of telling the truth, the validation that is so needed. We are the disclosure, as you and I've talked about before, and you are a huge one. And also with your books for children and the schools, that's the most unbelievable thing I've ever heard. I've been reading about that for a long time, and Barbara and I put it in our book, and you wrote about it. To go and teach kids when they're young, the planet is fragile. Be careful of how you heal, what you do to the planet. And we know us humans have really destroyed it. But
well, like I said, healing is definitely one of their primary missions. They are helping those who are doing good work for humanity. That is a pattern I've noticed, because they are healing men and women equally, people of all ages. It's all over the world. Cases stretch back 100 years, but many of the people they are contacting, and particularly healing, are artists. They're doctors, they're nurses, they're teachers, inventors, musicians, people who are doing good work for humanity. And I don't think people realize just how extensive these healings are. I put together a list in my book on this subject, The Healing Power of UFOs. And if I could just briefly go over some of these conditions.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, it's astonishing. I mean, there was a guy healed of angioma, a malformation of the blood vessels in the veins and arteries. Appendicitis, a person went to the doctor, they're like, your appendix is removed. He never went to the doctor for an appendicitis. Healings of arteriosclerosis, arthritis, they healed this waitress of arthritis that was bugging her for years. 3 cases of asthma, got 2 cases, people healed of blood clots. One of them is Michael Carter. He was a social worker. That speaks to, again, who's being healed and why. But many cases involving burns, some 30 cases of various forms of cancer. But I mean, you name it. Chris Bledsoe is pretty well known in this field. He was cured of Crohn's disease. I'm just going alphabetically down the list of some of these. Colitis, diabetes. David Jacobs has a case of a little girl, Alice Haggerty, who was cured of diphtheria. She was on her deathbed. The doctors expected her to die. Eczema, epilepsy. I have about 20 cases of people cured of various eye conditions, from glaucoma to nearsightedness to you name it. Fibromyalgia. One lady had her gallstones removed. Heart disease. A lot of cases involving people cured of heart disease. In fact, I looked up the top 10 causes of death in the world and in the US, and they have healed every single one of them. And heart disease is, I believe, one of the top 10 killers.
It is, and it's also broken hearts. I mean, that's part of their lovingness too, I think, don't you think? It's not only just heart disease, but it's broken hearts. I know I worked on 3 different hospitals, and so many of my friends had cancer too. I worked on Marine General Hospital here, and so many, half the women who had breast cancer said, I was so sick, and 3 of them said, I know I was healed from God or whoever they were, because I was in a really unhappy marriage for a long time. I know it was my disease that I brought on myself, and somehow 3 of them forgot about this, were somehow healed right before they died, and they couldn't believe how that this all just went away, but they said it was God or somebody else.
It's amazing to me because some of the healings are of relatively minor conditions, other are of course very major, but there's a case of a lady healed of hemorrhoids. At least 3 involving heals of hernias, high blood pressure, infertility, a lot of cases of people who had, fingers broken or a foot or their neck broke or whatever. Kidney disease, many cases. I have 6 cases of people healed of kidney stones alone.
Wow.
I mean, liver disease, multiple sclerosis, muscular dystrophy, pneumonia, polio, rheumatism, strokes, even people who have suicidal depression. 4 cases of people who were healed, of mental illness, I guess you could call it, but little things like colds and flus, a bunch of cases of that. Toothaches, tuberculosis, 2 cases of that. Many, many cases involving tumors and cysts, ulcers, yeast infections. I mean, the list is phenomenal. How many different types of healings. They know more about medicine than our best doctors. They know more about the human body than we do.
And then so all these people have said, we know that there was intervention because we saw someone, or that it just was the night before, like you say, the last minute thing. How do they know? I mean, just from the people that I've talked to too, they said, and I know that I was healed by, how can you get rid of, I mean, my scar is still there, but I mean, I know I've heard of these things, and you're just listing a ton of them. Did they understand what it was? Did they know it was beings, or did they think it was God or beings or whatever it was? That's still.
No, I didn't include. I did a whole chapter on, alternative healings of angels and this sort of thing, because I think some of those are UFO healings, but the 300 plus cases I put in this book are all ones involving pretty much verified direct intervention. And by that I mean there was a UFO or they were struck by a beam of light, or ETs came into their bedroom. There was a direct reason to believe that this was ET related, because I'm, the 300 cases I found are the tip of the iceberg. 1 in 100 people really report their encounter in any official capacity whatsoever. So you can times the 300 I found by 100, probably more, because if it's a healing, you are much less likely to, tell people. uh,
Right.
Sometimes you have to. I mean, there was a guy who was healed of a cyst on his head, and everyone's like, "What happened? Your cyst is gone." He's like, "Well, I'm a contactee." They came,
Wow.
and
That's a real obvious one too, because, just like me, I never talked about it because I thought people would think I was crazy. It's not worth it. But, when I was drowning at 19 in Mexico, and I had an experience. And I know, I've had many of these, and I believe everyone should believe you. Why would anyone make these things up? You can't make them up. We know when we've been healed. Yeah, they are miracles,
well,
and they
some
are.
are very well verified. There's a case involving Alberto Fernandez who tore his cornea, and this was verified by the doctor and the ophthalmologist, and he went back after ETs came into his room, and they often use lights to heal. Went back to the doctor. The doctor's like, "Oh my God, you really were probably going to lose your sight in that eye. What happened?" One guy contacted me. Um, Jim Schaefer is his name, from Canada. He had a cancerous tumor on his neck, and he was healed. And he went to the doctor and said, "ETs came and healed me." And the doctors had to believe him because they found no cancerous tissue. They still did surgery to remove some necrotic tissue, but they wouldn't put in their doctor's reports. He sent me his medical information that the ETs healed him because they, didn't see it happen. They couldn't verify it to that degree, but they did put miraculous healing because they could not understand how this could possibly have happened. His cancer was gone.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, doctors, this is verified in many cases by doctors. There was a guy in Brazil who was struck by a beam of light from a UFO, and he was eventually examined by government officials, police, UFO researchers, doctors. Some 50 people looked into his case because he had grown a new set of teeth. And he was like 70. So they do everything. Not a lot of dental healings, I will say. That's very rare. But Edith Fiore, she was one of the first people to really look into UFO contact cases in terms of a person with a PhD. She was the first to write about this, and she said half of her clients had experienced healings because people used to think this was quite rare. Ray Hernandez of the Free Organization found a similar number. I don't think it's quite that high in my own files. It's probably, well, it's hard to measure. MUFON found it was about 10%, which, for a skeptical organization, the MUFON handbook has, for investigators, has a section on physiological effects. And you know what the title of that chapter is, Mary? It's medical injuries from a UFO.
Oh, God.
Don't
Oh,
even,
wrong way. Total lie. I mean,
yeah, this is the
yeah,
problem.
yeah,
Society's very fear-based, and the fact is,
negative.
this is an absolutely consistent feature of contact. This is what they're doing. This is why they're taking people on board.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And I interviewed Ray last night, and I'm interviewing again tonight. And I know we're friends, and I've been friends with him. You've been friends with him for a long time. And I said, how many? And he said, thousands, millions. We don't know. Nobody knows unless we could do some big international survey of everyone on the planet, which we should be doing, like Brazil and a lot of other countries who embrace ufology and contact. And maybe someday, well, you're doing it more than anybody. And Ray is incredible what he's been doing in the last many years with the Edgar Mitchell Foundation, and what he's doing with his books as well, to put all the pieces together of how consciousness is the umbrella for a NDE or a, ghost experience or a whatever, all these different layers of psychism and encounters that people have. It's all the same thing. It's all consciousness, and it's
well, I'm not sure I would go so far as saying that it's all the same thing.
no, it's not all the same thing. There are different compartments under an umbrella. I misspoke. I apologize. Yes.
Oh, no. I mean, this is just an important point because there are some researchers out there who are saying we're not dealing with extraterrestrials. I'm like, hold on a second. Yes, we are. Yes, people do have NDEs, and they have Bigfoot encounters and spirit encounters and out-of-body experiences. And, even encounters with what we would call interdimensional beings or angels or what have you. But extraterrestrials are real, 100%. There are people like us living on planets. And this is what most of the UFO phenomena really is. I think it's a mistake to say this is an intelligence putting on different masks and masquerading as ETs. That's not true. And I see this trend gaining some momentum, but I don't like it, because where does that leave us? That's a very anthropocentric theory that has never worked out throughout history. We are not the center of the universe. Where would that leave us in terms of being the only life out there? No, that's ridiculous. There are ETs, and I argued with Ray about this because he's like, really? You think there's all these many different types, little blue beings and tall whites? I'm like, yes.
I saw them on a craft. I mean, I was talking to him about that last night. I said, we all have different perspectives, of course, and we all share whatever our truth is. So and it's good to get into discussions about this, because everyone has different points of view because of whatever their experience is, because Prism, and there are millions of everything, but it's very arrogant to think that humanity is the only intelligent. I mean, it's ridiculous. And that'll change. It seems like it's loosening up, the veil is thinning, but it's also getting more intense. The control and command center is the fear is heightening.
Well, our governments know, they've got the craft, they've got the bodies, they know this is absolutely extraterrestrial. They know.
They've always known. Dad was part of it. He said they know. I mean, he was really part of it. But they do know. So what do you think is going to happen in the next few years, other than we are in a great awakening moment? The disclosure is coming from people like you and all of us talking about it, and you writing all the books and spreading such incredible information from real experiences that people have, which is what's going on a lot now. Do you think it'll just expand and contract as it does till, I mean, we're sort of at a tipping point right now where love and
the cat's out of the bag.
Yeah, right.
I think most of the world knows what a UFO is. Yeah. Extraterrestrial craft. I think disclosure is inevitable at some point. I honestly don't think our governments are ever going to tell the truth about this. Honestly, they're very tightly controlling the narrative. I think they're failing at it, but I don't trust them. I don't think I ever will. I think disclosure ultimately is going to come from the people. I do think there will be open official contact. We are in a very rocky time in our history here on this planet. So the day could come when there's a mass landing. So we will see. It's very hard to predict the future, but I think we're going to see a lot of big changes, and that's putting it mildly.
Mildly. I know we're all holding our breath and trying to just raise the consciousness so people will rise to the occasion and try to start helping our humanity, help our planet thrive, and get out of this denial that's pretty scary, controlling.
Yeah, people need to let go of the fear. This is absolutely not a nefarious phenomena. Life on Earth can be very scary, especially with some of the fact that we're facing, existential crises in terms of, possible nuclear annihilation and magnetic sheets that are sweeping across our planet, the deterioration of our magnetic fields and all the hurricanes and so forth. But the ETs are out there, they're watching over us. Healings are widespread, and it's not limited to just humans. I have set a dozen cases, I'm sure there's hundreds, involving animals, Mary. Ray Hernandez, his pet dog.
That's one of the best ones ever. Right?
I love that case. And I've got stuff like it of not only dogs, but horses and plants as well. So this is an important point. Dolly talks about this, how she is on the craft and they're scooping up animals that are in danger of going extinct. We talk about this in the book Symmetry. So this is just an important point that people realize you can let go of the fear. No matter what happens, we're going to be all right. We have friends out there. Don't buy into the government's narrative. Look to yourself for answers. Allow allow your own abilities to flourish in terms of, psychic awareness, and we'll all be just fine.
Right. Believe, and be the truth, be the disclosure, and understand it more. There's so much information on this now, and we can be positive. It is love or fear. We know that. I mean, people should know that. And there are choices that we make every single day. With a few more minutes that we have, could you talk about symmetry a little bit? And you just talked about it, and I was going to ask you to share a little bit more about symmetry too. Could you talk about the book Symmetry a bit?
Yeah, this is, I think, one of the books I'm most proud of. I'm very much impressed by Dolly, who has left fear behind, who's had more extensive contact really than anyone I've ever interviewed. And I'm going to say anyone I've ever read about as well. I mean, her case is right there at the top in terms of how extensive it is. She has been on board when people were scooped up and examined and healed. And we've spent quite a bit of time going over what the purpose of onboard experiences are. And she's been there when people were healed of a wide variety of illnesses, injuries, burns. There was one lady who was in a house fire, burned over most of her body. She would have died. The ETs came and picked her up. But there was another case which was really poignant, in which they brought a doctor who was, I think, 103 or something like that, and basically celebrated his life because he had spent his life in service to humanity. And this just goes to show who these ETs are. They are absolutely working with us, for us, to help us. And the Symmetry is still on the bestseller list, I think, for a reason, because it's telling the truth about what UFO contact really is. And I think the reviews of the book reflect this, because people are like, wow, finally someone is putting all the pieces together. These UFO craft themselves are sentient. Dolly really answered that question for me, because I've heard that many times. Dolly has, of course, learned how to fly these craft. That was very cool, because I've heard that many times. She was able to fill in a lot of the blanks and answer a lot of the questions that I had about UFO contact. And that's why I thought it was such a treat. Every time I talk to her, I learn something new. So yeah, I'm just so blessed to have met her and been trusted to, put her story forth.
No, it's really beautiful. So just in sort of closing the next few minutes, what are 2 or 3 of the things? I mean, you hear the reviews, which is probably incredible validation, not that you needed it, but it's always nice to hear that people are saying, oh, I didn't know 1, 2, 3 things about contact, why we get taken, why you got taken, why I got taken. And the healing part of it, the positive part of it. So could you just talk a little bit more about that before we close? Because I just, that's what people need to hear more than anything, is the positive reaction and why this happens. And of course, they're bad humans and they're bad ETs, but the majority, huge percentage are here to help, heal, and help us and watch us. They're not going to come and do it for us. We have to do it ourselves, as we know, right? But if you could just explain for the next few minutes what some specifics are, so people can learn a little bit more.
Yeah, well, Dolly herself has experienced a few healings. They often will not heal everything on a person, because they do obey the law of karma and our own free will. Some people do choose illness to learn certain things. Dolly once did hurt her leg real bad, and they came and healed that. Another time she slipped on the ice and broke her elbow, and her hybrid son actually came down and spoke with her. They were a nice long counseling session, said how much he loved her and he's watching over her, and healed her largely of this broken elbow. So yeah, she describes many healings in the book. One that comes to mind involves a gentleman who came upon a landed UFO, and Dolly was inside. And he ran up to it, and don't do that. Be careful when you're coming upon it. There are some injury cases, and it's often people who are not thinking when they run up to a UFO that has just landed and it's really hot. And these things have plasma surrounding them. They're superheated when they come down. And he did get burned. And they pulled him on board and healed him. And they will counsel you as well. So I think that's an important thing to mention. They do, John Mack talked about upgrades, health upgrades. They are basically protecting our DNA from the radiation that's coming down. So that's another thing that they will do.
I've been told they're doing that to me too. Yeah, that's huge. And what else? And just the positive, I mean, just that they want to help, right? They're here to help us improve in all these different ways, right?
Yeah. And it's not just physical, it's mental, it's spiritual, it's psychic. So we see that, contactees, I did a whole chapter on this in the book, come away from their experiences with the ability to heal. One lady, she was healed of back pain, and they gave her the ability to do hands-on healing. And a lot of contactees have this ability. Wendy, who I mentioned, was healed of a cyst. She could do energy work and healed someone, brought him out of a coma, healed another person of gestational diabetes. I had another lady who was healed of eczema, and she's like, would you like a healing? And I went over to her office and laid down on her little massage table, and she never actually touched me. She just did energy work over me. And I started to question my eyesight, because I kept seeing these pastel pink and green lights coming out of her hands. And finally, I just mentioned it to her. I said, I don't know if I'm seeing things, but I would swear that I am seeing pastel lights coming out of your hands. She just smiled humbly and said, oh yeah, some people see that, some people don't. Another lady I interviewed, Pat Brown was her name, the sweet African American lady, who quit her job as a telephone operator and became a professional massage therapist, has testimonials from people she's healed and who've seen blue light coming out of her hands. She says when she's doing her healings, she gets in her mind's eye an image of the Greys up there on the ship, facilitating the healings, moving little knobs and stuff, and actually working with her. So that was kind of interesting and unique. So this, again, is a huge part of what they're doing. It's all about healing, and it's all levels. They will guide you. Dolly Saffron talks about a case where a gentleman was facing execution on death row. They came to him that night to counsel him through the experience. And I've got several cases, which I mentioned earlier, of people who had suicidal, thoughts. One guy was actually ready to do it, and Grays showed up, and he said, quote, voided the suicide. People have had severe depression, and that's lifted when they have an encounter. So they are working on many different levels. I've had cases of people whose IQ, which was tested, dramatically improved. So they are working mentally with people, spiritually, psychically, physically.
In almost every bucket that they can, and they are. Well, I'm finishing up. This has just been unbelievable. I always love speaking to you. Could you share how people can reach you and also how people can buy Symmetry, please?
Yes, thanks, Mary. I appreciate that. I do have a website. If you just type my name in on the internet, it should take you there. I will give the actual address, which is my name, Preston Dennett, 2 N's, 2 T's, .weebly.com. And you can absolutely contact me through my website or pretty much on any other form of social media. I do have a YouTube channel. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. My books are available through my website or on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, bookstores if you prefer. You can absolutely order them through bookstores. If they don't have it, they can order it for you. And yeah, Mary, thanks so much for having me on the show. I think this is such an important subject. You're doing important work. All of us in this field are.
Yes.
People really need to understand that we are not alone, and that ETs are not our enemy. They're our friends. And we need to really come together with love, truth, and compassion. And I think that is one of the main messages from the ETs. Love is the answer.
Love, what a beautiful note to end on. Well, love to you and look forward to our next talk. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mary.